If you live on Kiawah Island or hope to build there one day, new rules could soon change how close your home can be built to the beach. Town leaders say the proposal is meant to protect both property and the island's natural dune system as the shoreline continues to shift. Elijah Brown explains what's being considered.
We have a 10-mile long beachfront that is a precious resource for residents who live here, and what we want to do is protect the beach and dune system for the benefit of all of these constituencies.
On Kiawah Island, the ocean isn't just scenery, it's structure. This video shows the coastline constantly shifting as storms move in and reshape the shoreline. So now leaders are looking at a new zoning rule that would change how close development can come close to the water.
A regulatory tool establishes 2 buffer zones. Within those 2 buffer zones, one is more restrictive, that is closer to the ocean. No structures would be built in that particular zone. The second buffer zone, right now as proposed, only 20% of that particular area would be allowed for development.
In plain terms, this is about pulling the line back from the tide. It will limit how close new construction can get to the ocean and how much of the beachfront can actually be built on. Existing homes stay in place, but future building or rebuilding could face tighter limits.
We recognized and realized that in fact storms, any stronger or more storm surge, have the potential to move inland and negatively impact homes.
Officials say the reason is simple. When the ocean pushes in, the dunes push back. Those dunes act as a natural barrier during storms, but erosion and repeated storm surge are putting more pressure on them and even nearby homes.
You also have some property owners that own property along the ocean front, and their natural tendency is to want to develop that to the greatest extent possible. The broader community interest is to make sure that if there is development, it is development that is consistent with these other community goals.
So while the number of properties on Kiawah wouldn't change, the shoreline rulebook would, and leaders say they're still taking public input before anything is finalized. Reporting on Kiawah Island, Elijah Brown, Live 5 News.